In my 40 years on the bench, I've seen wealth do strange things to people. I've seen defendants who thought their family name could buy them out of accountability. I've seen arrogance walk through my courtroom doors more times than I can count. But this case, this young woman, Madison Sterling, walked into my courtroom after spitting on a homeless veteran, and I mean literally spitting in his face, and then had the audacity to laugh about it on social media. She called him street trash online while waiting for her court date. Let me tell you what happened in that courtroom and why what I said to her that day has been viewed over 8 million times. Because some lessons need to be taught, especially when someone thinks they're above learning them. When this case landed on my desk on a Tuesday morning, I remember setting down my coffee and reading through the file twice. Simple assault, public harassment, disturbing the peace. The victim's name, Robert Bobby Chen, 62 years old, Marine Corps veteran, homeless for 3 years after medical bills from his wife's cancer treatment bankrupted him. The defendant, Madison Sterling, 23 years old, daughter of real estate magnate Richard Sterling. I'd seen that name on buildings across Providence. As I reviewed the police report, I watched the security footage from the coffee shop where it happened. And I have to tell you, what I saw made me close my eyes and take a deep breath. In my 4 decades of doing this work, certain images stay with you. This was one of them. Bobby had been sitting outside a Starbucks on Westminster Street, not blocking the entrance, not bothering anyone, just sitting with his cardboard sign and his Marine Corps cap on the ground for donations. The footage showed Madison walking out with her coffee, looking at her phone, nearly stepping on his cap. When Bobby quietly said, "Excuse me, miss, careful of the cap," she stopped. What happened next, I knew, would define this entire case. And I knew it would test everything I believe about justice, compassion, and whether people can change. Here's what happened that morning, based on the evidence I reviewed, the witness statements, and that crystal clear security footage. Bobby had politely asked Madison to watch where she was stepping. According to witnesses, and there were 11 of them, people in line inside who saw everything through the window, Madison turned around, looked at Bobby, and her face twisted with disgust. When I watched the video, I heard her say clearly, "Don't you dare speak to me, you filthy homeless piece of garbage." Bobby, to his credit, simply nodded and looked away. He told police later he'd heard worse. That broke my heart right there, that this Marine veteran had heard worse and just accepted it as normal. But Madison wasn't done. She stood there looking at him, and I could see other pedestrians starting to notice. One woman, whose written statement I read 3 times, said Madison was performing for an audience, like she wanted people to see her put him in his place. Then Madison did something I've rarely seen in my years reviewing assault cases. She stepped closer to Bobby, leaned down, and spit directly in his face. I had to pause the video right there. I've watched thousands of hours of security footage in my career. I've seen violence, cruelty, rage, but there was something about the calculated coldness of this act that shook me. This wasn't a crime of passion. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate dehumanization. The footage showed Bobby wiping his face with his sleeve, tears in his eyes. You could see them even on the grainy security camera, while Madison laughed, actually laughed. Then she took out her phone and appeared to be recording him or taking a photo while he sat there, humiliated. According to witnesses, she said, "This is going on my Snapchat. My friends won't believe there's literal street trash on Westminster now." 2 bystanders, God bless them, immediately called 911. One woman brought Bobby napkins and water. A young man followed Madison down the street and kept her in sight until police arrived. When officers approached her 4 blocks away, the police report noted she seemed annoyed at the inconvenience and stated, "My father will have your badges for this harassment." She was arrested on the spot. The medical documentation showed Bobby had no physical injuries beyond the obvious degradation, but the attending officer noted he was visibly shaken and repeatedly apologizing as if he'd done something wrong. That detail haunted me. Here was a man who served his country, lost everything caring for his dying wife, and when someone assaulted him, he apologized. As I continued reviewing the evidence over the next few days, the picture became even clearer and more disturbing. The detective assigned to the case had obtained Madison's social media posts. I don't usually look at defendants' social media unless it's directly relevant, but in this case it was evidence of her mindset and her pattern of behavior. She had posted Bobby's photo, his face visible, tears on his cheeks, spit on his forehead, to her Snapchat story with the caption, "When street trash talks to you, know your place." The post had been viewed 847 times before she deleted it after her arrest. But screenshots had been saved by multiple people, which is how it reached the detective. I sat in my chambers looking at that screenshot for a long time. Bobby's dignity, stripped away. His face, shared for entertainment. His humanity, mocked for likes and laughs. What stood out to me most was the calculated nature of it all. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. She'd committed the assault, photographed the aftermath, posted it publicly, and captioned it with contempt. Every step was a choice. The witness statements were consistent. All 11 people described Madison as cruel, entitled, performing, and showing no remorse. The woman who'd comforted Bobby told police she was smiling the whole time. Even when she spit on him, she was smiling. 7 witnesses gave statements specifically noting that Bobby had been polite, quiet, and non-threatening. 3 mentioned his Marine Corps cap and expressed outrage that a veteran was treated this way. 1 elderly man, a Vietnam vet himself, had tears in his eyes when giving his statement, according to the detective's notes. I also learned that Bobby had been trying to get into the VA housing program. He'd been on a wait list for 14 months. He did odd jobs when he could get them. He never drank or used drugs, something multiple local business owners confirmed when interviewed. They called him respectful and kind. Several said they'd given him food or small jobs. The contrast couldn't have been starker. A veteran trying to survive with dignity versus a young woman weaponizing her privilege. By the time I finished reviewing everything, I knew this case wasn't just about assault. It was about who we are as a society and how we treat the most vulnerable among us. By the time Madison's court date arrived 3 weeks later, the video had gone viral. A witness had posted their own phone footage to TikTok, and it exploded. Over 8 million views, thousands of comments calling for justice. News outlets picked it up. Veteran advocacy groups demanded accountability. My clerk told me the courthouse phones had been ringing constantly. Media wanted interviews. People wanted to know what I would do. Here's what I told my staff. It doesn't matter if 8 people see it or 8 million. In my courtroom, everyone gets the same fair process under the law. The viral attention doesn't change what I do. It can't. I focus on the facts, the law, and the person in front of me. But I'll be honest with you, I felt the weight of it. Not pressure to perform for cameras, but responsibility. Bobby's story represented so many invisible people in our society. Homeless individuals who are dehumanized every day, whose suffering is ignored, whose dignity is denied. This case had become bigger than one incident. It had become a mirror reflecting how we treat those who've fallen on hard times. And frankly, what that mirror showed wasn't pretty. The public wanted accountability. So did I. But more than that, I wanted Madison to truly understand what she'd done. Not because millions were watching, but because that's what justice requires. When Madison Sterling walked into my courtroom on that Thursday morning, I observed everything carefully. That's what 4 decades of experience teaches you, to watch, to notice, to understand who's standing before you. She wore an expensive designer suit, navy blue, perfectly tailored. Her hair was styled like she was attending a business meeting, not a criminal hearing. Diamond earrings caught the light. She walked with confidence, almost irritation, like this was beneath her. The courtroom was packed. I noticed at least a dozen people wearing veteran insignia, Marine Corps, Army, Navy. They'd come to support Bobby. Local homeless advocates sat in the gallery. News cameras lined the back wall within the permitted areas. And Bobby sat in the front row wearing clean clothes. Someone had clearly helped him prepare, with his Marine Corps cap in his hands. The bruises of humiliation don't show on camera, but I could see them in his eyes. I called the court to order and looked at the case file one more time. Then I looked at Madison. "Miss Sterling," I said, "you're here today charged with assault and public harassment. I've reviewed all the evidence in this case, the video footage, the witness statements, the police reports. I've also seen the social media posts. Before we proceed, I want to give you an opportunity to address the court. What do you have to say about what happened?" She stood, and I could see her attorney whisper something to her. She cleared her throat. "Your Honor, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. I was having a stressful day, and Mr. Chen startled me when he spoke. I may have overreacted, but the video makes it look worse than it was." I felt my jaw tighten. I've been patient with a lot of defendants over the years, but I've also learned to recognize when someone is being fundamentally dishonest. "Miss Sterling," I said slowly, 11 witnesses say you spit in Mr. Chen's face. The security footage clearly shows you spit in his face. The police report documents officers arriving to find your saliva still visible on his forehead. How does the video make that look worse than it was?" She hesitated. "I just mean the context isn't clear, Your Honor." "The context," I said, "is that Mr. Chen politely asked you to watch where you were stepping near his donation cap. Is that correct?" "I suppose, but—" "And your response to a polite request from a 62-year-old Marine Corps veteran was to call him filthy, homeless garbage, spit in his face, photograph him in his humiliation, and post that photo online with mocking commentary. Is that the context we're discussing?" The courtroom was dead silent. Madison's face flushed. "Your Honor, I don't think— Miss Sterling, did you or did you not post Mr. Chen's photograph to social media with the caption, 'Know your place'?" Her attorney stood. "Your Honor, my client deleted that post," and I held up my hand. "Counselor, I'm asking your client a direct question." Madison looked at the floor. "I did post it, but I was upset and—" "You were upset," I repeated. "You were upset that a homeless veteran existed in your presence and had the audacity to speak to you. So you assaulted him, photographed his pain, and shared it for entertainment." I let that sit in the air for a moment. Then my bailiff approached and handed me a tablet. "Your Honor, there's something else you should see." I looked at the screen. More screenshots, these from just 2 days ago. Madison's private Instagram story, visible to friends. The caption read, "This homeless court thing is so dramatic. Judge Caprio is literally making a mountain out of nothing. Community service for asking someone to move? Insane." I felt something I rarely feel on the bench, genuine anger. Not rage, but the deep, disappointed anger you feel when someone shows you they've learned absolutely nothing. I looked up at Madison. "Miss Sterling, you posted 2 days ago that this case is literally nothing, that I'm being dramatic, that you're being punished for asking someone to move." Her face went white. "Let me be very clear with you, young lady. What you did is not nothing. What happened to Mr. Chen is not nothing." I turned to Bobby. "Mr. Chen, would you like to address the court?" Bobby stood slowly, cap still in his hands. His voice was quiet but steady. "Your Honor, I just want to say, I served in the Marines for 8 years. I loved my country. When my wife got sick, I spent everything to save her. When she died, I had nothing left, but I never stopped trying. I work when I can. I don't bother people. I just wanted to be treated like a person." His voice cracked. "When she spit on me, I felt like I didn't matter at all, like my service didn't matter, like my life didn't matter. And then she put my face online for everyone to laugh at." He wiped his eyes. "I don't hate her, Your Honor. I just hope she never makes anyone else feel the way she made me feel." The courtroom was silent except for the sound of people crying quietly. I looked at Bobby for a long moment. Then I looked at Madison, who was finally starting to cry. But I've been doing this long enough to know the difference between remorse and fear of consequences. I took a breath and composed my thoughts. This was the moment where I had to balance justice with teaching, punishment with the possibility of redemption. "Miss Sterling, please stand." She stood, trembling now. "I've been a judge for 40 years. I've seen thousands of defendants stand where you're standing right now. Some are remorseful, some are scared, some genuinely made mistakes they regret deeply. I paused. You posted on social media that I'm being dramatic, that this is literally nothing. Let me tell you what's not nothing. Another pause, letting it sink in. Mr. Chen, sitting right there, served this country for 8 years as a United States Marine. He protected your freedom to live the privileged life you've lived. He lost everything, caring for his dying wife. And when you walked past him that morning, he politely asked you to watch your step. I could feel the emotion in my voice, but I kept it measured. Your response was to dehumanize him, to assault him, to photograph his pain and share it for laughs. You treated a human being, a veteran, a widower, a man down on his luck, like he was trash to be mocked. Madison was crying harder now. What you did reveals something deeply troubling about your character. You believe your wealth, your family name, your social position put you above other people, above common decency, above the law. I let that hang in the air. This sentence isn't primarily about punishment, Miss Sterling. It's about teaching you something you should have learned long ago, that every human being has dignity, that respect isn't optional, that your actions have consequences, that kindness matters more than your last name. I looked at my notes. Here's what I'm ordering, and I want you to listen carefully to why each element matters. Third, a formal public apology to Mr. Chen to be delivered in this courtroom next month in writing and in person, explaining specifically what you did wrong and what you've learned. Not a lawyer-written apology, your words, your understanding. Fourth, mandatory counseling focused on empathy development and understanding privilege. 12 months, weekly sessions, with progress reports sent to this court. Fifth, a $15,000 donation to local homeless veteran services. Sixth, 3 years of probation. If you violate any terms, if you show contempt for this process, if you post anything demeaning about Mr. Chen or this case, you will serve the full 90 days in jail immediately. I looked directly at her. Miss Sterling, you have lived 23 years believing you're better than other people. You're not. You're standing in a courtroom because you committed a crime, not a minor mistake, but a deliberate act of cruelty against one of the most vulnerable members of our community. I genuinely hope, you use this time to think about who you want to be. Because right now, the person I see in front of me is someone who treats human beings as less than human. That's not who you should be. That's not who anyone should be. You have the resources, the education, the opportunities to make a positive difference in this world. Instead, you chose to hurt someone for your own amusement. That ends today. I looked at Bobby. Mr. Chen, this court thanks you for your service and apologizes that you were treated so poorly in the country you defended. Then back to Madison. Court is adjourned. Report to the probation office within 48 hours to begin your sentence. I brought down the gavel. After I adjourned court, something happened that I'll remember for the rest of my life. Bobby approached the bench slowly, cap still in his hands. Your Honor, he said quietly, thank you, not just for today, but for seeing me, for treating me like I matter. I came down from the bench, something I rarely do, and shook his hand. Mr. Chen, you do matter. Your service matters. Your dignity matters. Don't let anyone ever tell you otherwise. He had tears in his eyes. So did I, honestly. Several of the veterans in the gallery came up to Bobby afterward, shaking his hand, giving him information about VA resources, offering help. One older Marine gave Bobby his phone number and told him, "You call me anytime, brother. We take care of our own." Madison was led away by her attorney, finally crying real tears. I heard her ask her lawyer, "Can we appeal this?" Even then, still looking for a way out. But something in her face had changed. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the beginning of understanding. I don't know. I hope it was the latter. The video of my ruling went viral too. Over 8 million views, countless articles, national news coverage. People appreciated seeing someone held accountable. But I'll tell you what I told my clerk afterward. I didn't do this for the views or the validation. I did it because it was right, because Bobby deserved justice, because Madison needed to learn. 3 weeks later, I learned that Bobby had been moved up on the VA housing wait list, partly due to the public attention his story received. He was placed in transitional housing with support services. That news made me happier than any viral video ever could. Let me tell you what I hope people learn from this case, because it matters far beyond one courtroom moment. First, social media is not real life. Those posts where you mock others, where you treat people as content for entertainment, they have real consequences. Madison learned that the hard way. She thought she could spit on a human being, post his humiliation online, and face no accountability. She was wrong. Second, wealth and privilege are not armor against basic human decency. I don't care who your father is, how much money your family has, or what your last name is on buildings across the city. In my courtroom and in life, what matters is how you treat people, especially the most vulnerable among us. Third, our homeless neighbors are human beings with stories, with dignity, with value. Bobby wasn't street trash or an inconvenience. He was a Marine who served his country and a husband who loved his wife so much, he sacrificed everything for her. Every person you pass on the street has a story. Treat them accordingly. Fourth, veterans deserve our respect, our support, and our gratitude, not our contempt. Bobby served so Madison could live in freedom. The least she owed him was basic human kindness, and finally, redemption is possible, but only through genuine change. I gave Madison a chance to learn, to grow, to become better. Whether she takes that chance is up to her. I hope she does. I genuinely hope she looks back on this someday and understands that accountability was the greatest gift she could have received. After 40 years on this bench, I've learned that justice isn't just about punishment. It's about teaching. It's about protecting the vulnerable. It's about holding up a mirror to society and saying, we can do better. We must do better. Bobby Chen deserved better that day outside the coffee shop. He deserves better every day. And so does every person struggling, every veteran waiting for help, every human being just trying to survive with dignity. That's what justice means to me. That's what I still believe after all these years. And that's why cases like Madison's matter, not because they go viral, but because they remind us who we are and who we should strive to be.